One of the most powerful chapters in the Bible is, in my opinion, Leviticus chapter 26. For it speaks first of what good things will happen to a nation when it obeys God. Now, it is written to Israel in particular, but the lesson is wider than just one nation. Leviticus 26 says, "If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and perform them, then I will give you rain in its season. The land shall yield its produce, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. You shall eat your bread to the full and dwell in your land safely. I will give you peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none shall make you afraid. I will rid the land of evil beasts, and the sword will not go through your land. You will chase your enemies, and they shall fall by the sword before you." Now, there's more where that came from. The blessings just keep on going in this chapter for several more verses. Obedience to God begets national blessing. But after the Lord tells us of the blessings of a righteous nation, he then goes on and gives us a picture of what happens when a nation that was previously righteous turns its back on the Holy One. And it isn't pretty. You see, Israel did that a lot. They turned their back on God. And other nations throughout the time have also done the same. Now, since the days of ancient Israel, no nation on earth has come into being like our nation, like the United States. And while the USA has never been a truly Christian nation, our founding was basically on Christian principles. Indeed, Patrick Henry in 1776 wrote, "It cannot be emphasized too often that this great nation was founded not by religionists, but by Christians, not on religions, but on the gospel of Jesus Christ." One article I read stated that 52 of the 55 signers of the Declaration of Independence were committed Christians. And while this nation has been far from perfect and indeed guilty of many sins, up until the last couple of generations, it has been guided decidedly by Judeo Christian ethics. Not so much anymore. And here's the problem: the nation that turns away from God is a nation that turns away from blessing and toward the abyss of his judgment. As we continue in Leviticus 26, read about the warnings of God. It says, "But if you do not obey me and do not observe all of these commandments, so that you do not perform all of my commandments, but break my covenant, I will also do this to you. I will even appoint terror over you, wasting disease and fever, which shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of heart. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. I will set my face against you, and you shall be defeated by your enemies. Those who hate you shall reign over you, and you shall flee when no one pursues you." That's just a short sample of what this chapter tells us. This section of warning is for a backslidden nation, and it goes on for 26 long verses. It speaks of 5 cycles of wrath, each an escalation over the one before it. It is a warning given to a nation that knew God at one time, but has since forgotten him. Now, why is this important? It's important because we are such a nation that was once close to God, that has drifted away. And now, as a nation, we are running away from God as fast as we can. The United States of America is set up for judgment. Now, how did we get to this place where God would begin to abandon the USA? Well, it did not happen overnight. In fact, it began in a place where no one would even expect it. We got here first because the churches that should be proclaiming righteousness stopped doing so. As a pastor, my heart breaks because of this. Listen to the words attributed to a Frenchman named Alexis de Tocqueville. De Tocqueville visited the United States in the early 1830s, looking for a source of America's rising power. And listen to what he discovered. He said, I sought for the genius of greatness and genius of America in her commodious harbors and her ample rivers, and it was not there. I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her fertile fields and boundless forests, and it was not there. De Tocqueville then spoke of his search through America's mines and her world commerce and her school systems and institutions of learning and in her democratic Congress and in her matchless Constitution, with no success of finding the source of this great nation. But he finally found it. He wrote, not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits flame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. He said, America is great because America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. For the most part, our pulpits no longer flame with righteousness. Ministers have become fearful of speaking against sin. We have forgotten the holiness of God. We have traded in the importance of seeing people place their trust in Jesus Christ to be saved with that of being woke, with being more concerned with DEI, that is, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, than with saving eternal souls that are in danger of burning in hell. The prophet Ezekiel had a vision described in chapter 9 of the book that bears his name. He described destroying angels bringing ruin upon Jerusalem because men no longer cared about sin, about truth, about holiness. They had little regard for God's holiness. Listen to where God told the destroying angels in Ezekiel's vision to start their destruction. He said in Ezekiel 5 or Ezekiel 9, go through the city and kill. Do not let your eyes spare, nor have any pity, and begin at my sanctuary. Don't miss that. In other words, start executing a holy judgment at God's temple, at the place that was supposed to be holy, the holy repository of truth, because it was no longer. The Apostle Peter also talked about judgment beginning with the church. He said, for the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God. And if it begins with us first, what will be the end of those who do not obey the gospel of God? In my opinion, the reason why our country is experiencing so much division that rips away at its former greatness and has left us totally bankrupt in the national treasury and, more importantly, in national righteousness, it begins with the weakness of the church, particularly with pastors and other leaders. Now, yes, there are still some great churches in this land. I thank God for that. But many of our churches and denominations have become indistinguishable from the culture around it. The church is supposed to preach truth even when it's hard. It is to preach the righteousness of God, even when people don't want to hear it. It is to preach the cross of Jesus Christ as the only way for a person to be saved, even if it is, as they say, culturally insensitive or to be considered hate speech. Truth is truth. It does not change. Likewise, the message that pastors should preach should not change. Often now, they veer into the cultural abyss. This is the first of many reasons of why God would abandon a nation. Now, over the next few messages, I will give you biblical reasons for the turning away of God from our nation. These will not be pleasant. Perhaps few will even agree with me, but I will back up what I have to say with God's word. Thanks for watching.